up? So I'm going to walk you through my entire productivity workflow start to finish, both the Linux tools that I use as well as my physical notebook structure, which is pretty much the backbone of the entire workflow here. So anyways, I'm going to put timestamps in the description and I'll put other notes on screen as needed. Okay, so my reasoning is this, right? I can type way faster than I can physically write. But there are definitely times where it makes a lot more sense to physically take notes because you've got a page in front of you that you can visually map out your thoughts and your ideas and big picture outlines, and you're also going to remember things you write down a lot more when you physically take notes. You know, if I want to make a to-do list for things that I got to get done, I'm gonna physically write that down. But there are also obviously times when it makes more sense to use a computer for notes because, I mean, yeah, my typing speed is way faster than my handwriting. And lots of other stuff too. I mean, things like you can move text around really easily, and you can copy in links and put in code blocks and all sorts of other stuff. So my system overall is honestly very minimal, and that is intentional, okay? I think it's important not to get caught up in the idea of like use a million different productivity software pieces and like have this huge complex workflow. Don't do that, okay? Literally do not do that. Have very simple tools that solve problems for you, and you have your workflow and just keep it. Don't get caught up in like the culture of you gotta get all this various software. That said, I have essentially three things I use, okay? I take notes in Markdown files. At one point I used to use plain text, but I've switched to Markdown, just for like the syntax highlighting. I think that does make it a little bit nicer. So Markdown notes, NeoVim, but that's arbitrary because it's Markdown. I could switch text editors and it wouldn't be a problem. And then I use rsync to sync my notes. And that's basically the whole workflow. The only other thing is my dmenu notes script, which I've shown a few times. That's how I have my notes organized pretty much. I can just fuzzy search through them or, you know, do various stuff. I can create a new note, and I added in this syncing option directly into my notes menu. Previously I had my rsync commands all in a different rsync script, but I figured I should just stick it right in the notes menu so it's like right there, ready to go, and I can just, you know, do the sync. It's gonna sync up to my ThinkPad. I've got a mirror copy of this script on my ThinkPad so I can sync back, and essentially it's just sync notes to and then sync notes back from, and it's gonna keep it, you know, two-way syncing updated. So it's really that simple. And in terms of my note structure digitally, essentially just, I figured I would show you my video ideas note here since I don't really want to dox myself. I'd have to like blur so much in like my actual work-related notes that it just doesn't make sense to try to even show them. But for my video ideas notes, this kind of gets the idea across of how I take notes. And essentially just, I have a structure that I'm gonna follow for whatever particular topic or note it is. So in this case, I've got the ideas I'm working on, then I go to the outline and taking notes on that idea stage, and you know, this is like the next topic I was thinking about working on. Then I got the recording stage, so this is the video I'm working on right now. Then that goes to the, I have to make thumbnail and title and description, and then I upload it. So that's pretty much my workflow. I mean, it's honestly really straightforward and simple. And in terms of my actual notes, you know, as I'm working on a video or another topic, honestly, they're pretty messy. I mean, having the Markdown rendering does help a lot in terms of the organization because I can have, you know, headers and I can have, you know, different syntax highlighting throughout. So that definitely does help. And I talked about this plugin a lot, so I won't talk about it too much, but I'll link it in the description if you want it. But anyways, so that's, you know, sort of my digital note-taking, I don't know, workflow here. And I'm going to show you my notebook structure since that's a lot more emphasis on the actual structure of how I have the notes done. Okay, so I have this dual page notebook setup that I use, and honestly I'm quite proud of it because it has evolved over the years. But to start with, I've just got my basic to-do list items. I much prefer physical to-do lists just because, I mean, it's satisfying to cross the items out once they're done, but also I just find it, you know, a lot more likely for me to actually remember the item if I physically write it down, you know, as opposed to typing it. So anyways, physical to-do list, date on the item if needed. I also have this space up here specifically for items that should be sort of in my long-term memory for the coming weeks or possibly even months that I just want to carry over from page to page. Again, just kind of the idea of a written reminder is, you know, more likely to kind of stay in my memory. I date the particular pages. Usually this dual page lasts me like 1 to 3 days, just depends on how much work there actually is to get done. The latter half of the page, so this is what I was talking about in terms of using a piece of paper to actually visualize what's in your head, in a way that you kind of can't really do on a computer in the same way. So, for me, what I like to do, anything big picture outlines or big problems to solve, anything that's going to be A to B to C to D, and then maybe D has an E, an F, and a G coming off of it, anything that I need to draw it out, that's what goes here. And sometimes I will take, more complex long form notes in my notebook, but usually I try to do that, on my laptop because honestly, like, my typing speed is so much faster than my handwriting, so it doesn't make sense to kind of shoot myself in the foot by like trying to handwrite those, long form complex notes. What writing is really good for is things that you need to focus on, things that need to be memorable. So just use, whatever tool is best suited for the job, right? Anyways, this other page is where it starts to get interesting, since this is what I use sort of more for personal reflection on the work I'm doing. This might be kind of more particularly applicable to me or applicable to somebody in my situation, but essentially for me, I built this in a few years ago, and it's really helpful. So every day I just write down, did I accomplish what I needed to do today? And that's a yes or no. And if not, then why not, and how can I improve on that? Because for me, it's really helpful to actually be able to identify, like, if I didn't accomplish what I set out to do, why didn't I? Like, what caused that? What set me off track? Whether that's something, a personal reason, like I didn't get enough sleep, or, that's something work related and actually related to the job that I then need to go through and fix and solve. Actually trying to reflect on it and write it down and sort of piece it out step by step, understand what happened, is really helpful to me. And just taking, 5 minutes at the end of the day to do this. And I also like to reflect on, okay, was anything especially good or especially bad about the day? To me, that's just helpful. It's just because if something bad does happen, kind of getting it out into a notebook and getting it out of your head is really helpful to kind of be able to forget about it and move on, especially if it's something completely out of your control that it just needs to, like, you gotta stop thinking about it, you gotta let it go. Anyways, next up, what would I like to improve on overall, for tomorrow or next week, or just in general, something that I want to improve on. So that's what I like to use, but obviously you can modify this, as much as you wish. This is just sort of what I use, and I guess a template potentially for if you do want to start kind of reflecting in a work-related sense or a productivity-related sense. This is what I would start with. I also use a habit tracker. This actually belongs in my personal notebook rather than my work notebook, but I wanted to draw out the example just on one page here. So habit tracker, essentially, I'm sure you've heard of it before, tracking, either a habit you want to build or you want to break. The one thing that I do that I don't know how many people do this, but I do have a marker for I was partway there to my goal, just for the sake of like, if your goal is like to walk an hour every day and, say you walked 30 minutes, right? You're partway to your goal. You shouldn't put that as a total X. A total X is like you slept on the couch all day, right? So there's a very big difference between I slept on the couch all day versus I only walked, 15 minutes or something like that. So I think, having a partway marker for me, that's helpful, especially because, the whole point of a habit tracker is holding yourself accountable. You don't have to answer to anybody else. It's just yourself. So anyways, I do that. I also have a personal journal as well, and that's pretty much unstructured. But anyways, this is the structure I use. Okay, so it's significantly later, but I did want to show you guys a couple of other applications and tools that I use or have used or would generally recommend for, I guess, various productivity related stuff. I do want to start by saying, like, don't fall into the trap of, like, using a million different productivity applications and spending more time on the productivity workflow than on actually getting stuff done. I feel like that's something that's kind of easy to fall into, so be careful of that, and when in doubt, kind of err on the side of minimalism and using less applications and just have one good system that actually does work for you. But anyways, so Calcure is the calendar application I've been using of late. I actually blinked my instance so I could show it to you guys, but it's got, your basic calendar layout. It's got Vim key bindings. It's got a nice little journal area. It's pretty easy to add in various, different events. It has integration with other applications. Generally, it's a good program. It does its job. To be fully transparent with you, I honestly do a lot of my calendar management just directly in a physical real life calendar. Maybe I'm weird for that. I feel like most people don't do that anymore, but honestly, I do that. It works for me. But I do have Calcure here in case, there is anything else that I do want to manage digitally. The predecessor to Calcure is Calcurse, which, to be honest, I like the name Calcure. It's good pun on Calcurse. But anyways, Calcurse was the original. It's just, a very basic calendar TUI application. It works, it does its job great. Honestly, I would recommend this one if you just want a minimal calendar that is functional, perfect, does its job. Calcurse. Another tool that I have been trying recently is Zeit, and I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, so don't skewer me, but I'm sure I'm pronouncing it wrong. But anyways, Zeit is essentially for tracking your time spent on applications, or sorry, not applications, on various projects or tasks or whatever you're trying to accomplish. And the point is that you'll have essentially this graph at the end that you can view the time you spent on the various things, which honestly I find really interesting and really helpful because I am used to tracking it by hand. I've always tracked the time I spent working on things, and tracking it by hand is a lot less efficient and it's a lot less accurate than actually tracking it properly with a program. So, I've been experimenting with Zeit. I will probably make a full video about it at some point, but, anyways, I did want to recommend it since I found it really useful thus far. But yeah, don't fall into the, pitfall of, like, using a million different applications and just spending more time on the system itself than on getting work done. That's about it. Good luck. I will see you next time. Peace.